this beginner watercolor lesson, we are going to learn how much water do we need to use with our watercolor paints. Before we get started, if you haven't checked out the previous beginner watercolor lesson, which is all about getting to know our brushes and making paint swatches, you can check that out linked in the description below. And I also have a beginner watercolor lesson all about beginner supplies, which is basically all of the supplies that you need to start watercolor. So you can also find that in the description below. I'm going to quickly go over the supplies I'm using. So here I have a watercolor sketchbook, which I will link below in the description for you, as well as all of the supplies I am using. And I have 2 jars of water. One is to clean my brushes. The other is to add water to my paints. So I have a clean water jar and a dirty water jar. The brush that I will be using is the size 8 round brush, Princeton Neptune. And the paints I will be using are from Decadent Pies pan set from Art Philosophy. So before we get started actually applying paint to paper, you might want to first draw out your circles. So here I basically just traced this little round pan of white metallic paint. I just traced that on my paper with a pencil. You can also take a scrap piece of paper like this and just trace and make rectangles instead of circles, or you can even trace a ruler or any kind of shape that you would like. And then you want to pick a paint that is very rich, very vibrant for this lesson. You don't want to pick like yellow or a pastel color, let's say like this peach color here, or like a silver color. You want something that is dark, because we'll be filling in all of these circles from darkest to lightest. And so you want a dark paint because it'll be a lot harder to do this lesson with, let's say, yellow. So here's an overview of what we'll be doing. I will be filling in the circle here with the least amount of water and the most paint. And then I will fill in the next circle with a little bit more water and less paint. And then this circle will have even more water and then even less paint. So we're basically trying to work from darkest to lightest. And you can also have as many circles as you want. I personally chose 4 circles. So the color I am using is this color here. This is called Blueberry, and it's from the Decadent Pies pan set. So if you want, you can also use your palette. I actually think I will. So I do need to clean this off. One of the questions that beginners have is, do I need to clean my watercolor palette every time I use it? And the answer is no. Actually, you'll want to keep your watercolor palette, like you don't want to clean your watercolor palette all the time, because you can reuse this paint that's on your palette. But I'm cleaning this because I do need space to kind of help me mix my water in my paint. I personally want to work from darkest to lightest because I feel like that will be a lot easier. You can, of course, do your own thing. You can work from lightest to darkest if you feel like that will be easier for you. So I'm just dabbing my brush here in my water jar. This is my clean water jar. And I'm taking this blueberry color and I'm adding it to my palette here in this well. And now I'm not adding any more water to my brush. I'm trying to use as less water as I can. So I'm just kind of taking this paint, adding it in this well, taking paint, adding it in the well. I'm not dipping my brush again in my water. So I'm trying to get as much paint and as little water as I can. Okay, and then now I'm going to fill in this circle here. And it's okay if you go outside the lines. I know I will. I'm not too worried about making it super pretty or anything. This is simply just to help me understand, you know, how much water do I need to get the shade of color that I want. So there's our darkest circle. Now I am going to take some water in my brush here. So I'm just dipping my brush in my water jar and I'm adding some water to this. And if you want, you can also have a sheet of paper to help to like test out your color to see if, okay, yeah, I need to add some more water. So I'm just adding some more water to this well here. I'm not adding any more paint. Okay, so now I'm going to take this, and it should be a little lighter than this circle. And if you feel like it could be a little darker, you can take some paint, add it to your well here, and then dip it in your circle. Alright, and then this next circle, now we're going to add even more water to this well. We're not adding any more paint at all. So adding more and more water. And if you're not sure if you should add more water, go ahead and test your paint on a scrap piece of paper, or in fact you can just test it right here on your swatch paper on your sketchbook or whatever paper you're using. Okay, so yeah, I'm just kind of filling in the circle, and yeah, it should be lighter than the other ones. And now for this last circle, we want to mix the lightest shade we can. So we want as much water as we can. In fact, you don't even have to take any of this now. You can just dip your brush in your water jar like this. Just dip it in your jar, add it to your circle. Alright, so let's do this again with a different color. I am now going to use this apple color here. And yeah, my jar is not clean anymore, so if you want, you can go ahead and change your clean jar. I'm not. It's okay. So I'm taking this apple color, adding it to this well. And so again, we want the least amount of water as we can. So I'm not dipping my brush in my water jar anymore. I'm just trying to get as much paint as possible in this well without adding more water. And then I am going to fill in this circle. And now, like we did with these blue circles, now we're going to add more water without adding more paint. I feel like I could add a little bit more paint. I think I added too much water. Yeah, so this should show you, okay, how much water do I need to get the shade of color that I want. And so the more water you use, the lighter your shade will be. The less water you use, the darker it'll be. So again, I'm adding more water without adding more paint. And my color is looking a little dull, it looks like, because my water jar is blue. Yeah, it's dulling because some of the blue from my water jar is getting in my red. Could add a little bit more paint. It's looking a little too light. And then, of course, we are adding even more water. And in fact, you can just dip your brush in your water jar. You don't have to use your pan, your palette. And so when you paint with watercolor, you want to paint from lightest to darkest. So you always want your first layer to be the lightest. And so with your first layer, you will most likely use the most amount of water. And then you always want to be sure that you let your layers completely dry before adding on the second layer. And for fun, I decided to add another row. So I'm taking this color here. This is the green in the Decadent Pies pan set. I think it's called Lime. Yeah, I think that's what it's called. So again, I am taking the most amount of paint and the least amount of water. So I basically just dipped my brush once in my water jar. This is like one of my most favorite greens ever. It's so beautiful. I have like a cat hair in my paint. Okay. As you paint with watercolor and you have a cat or a dog, you will find pet hair in your paint. It's just normal. Okay. Yeah, so I'm just trying to make this circle as dark as I can. And next, I'm adding more water to this. Well, I'm not adding any more paint. Alright, and then I'm adding even more water. And then this time I'm basically just dipping my brush in my water and using whatever paint is left in my brush. I hope that you found this lesson helpful and that you had fun. If you'd like to check out all the other lessons in this beginner watercolor series, you can find the playlist below in the description. And if you don't know, I go live every single Friday morning at 10 a.m. EST for a watercolor tutorial. So I'd love to see you during one of those live tutorials. And you can find all of the replays of those live tutorials in the description of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.